And good morning, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. And as you all know, the red versus blue scrimmage occurred last night, and we've had another very fun and kind of scary week of training camp. I am joined by Luca from Bills Chat, who will be discussing with me everything that we can talk about from this past week. I hope you're ready because it's going to be a very fun episode, and I am happy to have you all with me today. Here you go, Chris. Joe.
Previous play will go.
And once again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. As I mentioned before, I am joined by Luca from Bills Chat, and I was just lauding over his very aesthetically pleasing background. Luca, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a little early for my usual Saturday morning, but as soon as you sent the call over to kind of have me join you, I was excited, altered my Saturday morning schedule just to accommodate such a thing like this morning's episode. And I'm excited to dive into everything you sent over that we have laid out today.
Yes, I'm excited too, man. We had a very fun week. And for all of you joining to the chat, I want to first and foremost say thank you again. I really appreciate your time. Excited to interact with you today. If you could do me a favor, do Cover One a favor. Please like this video and like all the content coming out on our channel. Obviously, with training camp going on, there is a lot to talk about and a lot of videos and live streams coming your way. We really appreciate any likes and shares that you can throw our way. It would mean the world to us. And if you are watching, if you're a regular, if you're new, please stick around to the end because we have a very exciting sponsorship that I am going to read off for you that I would love for you all to hear. But if you want a sneak preview, it is in the description below. But I'll give you more detail as the show comes to an end. But before we get to an end, we have to have a beginning. And that beginning is talking about last night's very fun red versus blue scrimmage. And Luca, it comes to us every year. It's one of the most hyped things in the offseason. I believe it was a 30,000 plus crowd yesterday that got to attend it, which is awesome. Bills Mafia, you showed out. That's fantastic. Really happy to hear that turnout. But a lot of interesting things happened last night that, you know, we have been talking about select matchups. We've been talking about select players, and it feels like every day, some new name somewhat emerges in the competition for receiver and the competition for linebacker, cornerback, whatever it may be. But first, Luca, I just want to ask you a very simple question, one that I've been asking kind of every week since training camp started. And for you, that's who stood out in your eyes, both on offense and defense?
I mean, for me, what's kind of stood out because some might have not expected it is the emergence of Trent Sherfield a little bit. I think he's kind of showing what he's always been around the league. He just finally has an opportunity that's not like what he's had in the past of his career. And he really seems to be seizing it because going into training camp and everything, it really seemed like that wide receiver 3 option is going to be more about Khalil Shakir or, Deontay Hardy or anything like that. But Trent Sherfield has been very impressive early on. And then even in that red and blue scrimmage, which we can go into further later, he was, again, very impressive. He seems to have a little bit of a rapport with Josh Allen. And maybe there is something there to be had with that wide receiver 3 spot that Trent Sherfield can really thrive in. And, when we get into it further, if we do it right now, whatever it is, it's interesting because his career path kind of has never allowed him to have, again, like I said, an opportunity like this. And this is really maybe his first chance to finally seize kind of a legitimate role in an offense. And what a time to do it with Josh Allen and these Bills.
Fully agree. Sherfield is one of the people that I've had on my top players on offense list. When he was signed, I obviously expected him to kind of maintain that slot role because that's what he was doing over in Miami, and he was pretty productive in doing so, especially when you have a timing-based offense like Miami's that really relies on Tua kind of hitting the seconds right, getting the ball out quickly, and someone to be adept at that is very useful in the Bills offense where that felt like we were lacking in that last year. And while I have lauded over Dalton Kincaid, and I will laud over him in this episode, and the likes of Deontay Hardy and other receivers, Sherfield deserves a lot of credit and a lot of praise because while he is this veteran and he's on a one-year deal, and you can often forget about guys on those contracts because it seems like it's a low-risk move, Sherfield has not only proven that he's an exceptional vet, a good teammate, but that he is fully capable in this offense. And it's important to understand that while we do have a Dalton Kincaid that does seem to be the 12 personnel remedy to the offense that's going to man the middle of the field, be like a very reliable slot option, it can't always be him. You have to have other options as well, because having an additional slot component, especially in your receiving room that now gets bigger because of someone like Kincaid, opens up even more for the offense and gives the middle of the field for any defense you're facing fits. So to see Sherfield kind of being productive is a very encouraging sign. I really am rooting for the guy. And beyond just him being a good receiver in this offense with the opportunity to win the wide receiver 3 job, if so, and maybe even ensure a future spot for future years for the likes of Allen, I also think that we have to be very excited about the run blocking component, because whatever your take is on the offensive line in this offseason and whatever your take is on it, in training camp, any additional run blocking component that's a positive is something that I am really excited to see. And Sherfield gives you that in full to go along with the likes of Dawson Knox and a budding Kincaid who has to improve on it, but there is the potential there. But Luca, anyone else that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, the other usual suspects like Rousseau and basically the edge group as a whole has looked very good overall. Even in that red and blue scrimmage, they kind of, when they got against the 2s and 3s of the offensive line, they were just blowing them up left and right. And that's where it really becomes the defensive line might be looking good right now, but is it the defensive line looking good, or maybe the depth of the offensive line looking underwhelming? And the ultimate question is that, like, that's kind of, you asked me what stood out, what's been underwhelming. That kind of unknown is really where I'm scratching my head and not knowing how to be receptive with it. I don't know how to take it exactly, because even a guy like Bates, who has starting experience, comes in with the 2s and all of a sudden looked kind of like he was a depth piece more than anything else. But we know he can be a reliable right guard. It's just interesting to see that at a different dynamic with different personnel around him, he couldn't even kind of stand out among the rest. And then you have Osiris Torrance looking very impressive at right guard himself. So it's like, how are they going to handle that whole thing? And then is it the D line is just that good, and so the depth offensive line can't keep up? It's a big question to me, and kind of has been standing out. The trenches as a whole has been a big question mark, and kind of trying to figure out what's good and what's bad about it.
Training camp as a whole and in the offseason, I firmly agree it's very tricky to evaluate. And it seems that we have this conversation every year, right? You always look at practice. You always look at offensive line versus defensive line. Defensive line is usually making some like insane strides or some crazy plays. And then you kind of get concerned about offensive line. But I also think, and this was a point, I'm trying to remember who made it on Thomas's show the other day. It might have been Yeston. It might have been AJ. But offensive line, when they're playing in the regular season, are far more physical than what they're going to show in training camp, right? There has to be like, I guess you can call it an edge taken off on the physicality in training camp, because no one wants to hurt anybody. You're trying to simulate a game. You're trying to simulate real game scenarios. But at the same time, the opportunity to bury someone's face into the ground is not, it's not something you're going to do in practice. And I think what happens is you see this every year where the defensive line kind of takes advantage of the lack of true physicality from the offensive line, and they're able to penetrate, get through would-be sacks constantly. But I do think that there's almost like slight gas off when you look at the offensive line, which makes it very difficult to evaluate. Because when you talk about run plays and run blocking, they push forward, and it doesn't seem like you're going to really kind of jab with anybody too harshly. Like there is something held back. But defensive line, their goal is to get forward, their goal is to get through. If a Spencer Brown or a Deion Dawkins can't put your, bring you down and like keep you down, then you're going to get by them. So they might have won the rep, but they didn't, because you still got by and would be sacked. So with offensive line, it's funny because I saw a lot of people say the depth is an issue. The depth is, of course, an issue, and we'll have a conversation about right tackle and especially what happened this week. But I also think it's tricky to evaluate offensive line, just because, again, you're not really seeing them play to the full strength as much as it's really gelling your formation together, trusting the guys next to you, figuring out how to like protect certain blocks, certain stunts that are coming your way, and then kind of building that chemistry so that when you do go into week one against like a Jets defensive line, you might be more prepared for it and might be able to bring that physicality. So, Luca, do you agree with that, or do you have a different opinion?
Oh, absolutely. I do think there's an absolute point to be made when it comes to offensive line. They're generally the biggest boys out there, and they need to be careful about their health and their well-being. So yeah, naturally you're not going to be going 100%, nor is coaching or conditioning or anything like that going to be asking them to do so. You want to make sure they kind of get the reps in, but safely and kind of cautiously in a way. So rather than go 100% of the, all the time, they're probably going 75, 80%, kind of being cautious and just being mindful about where they're taking their steps, where they're moving around, what they're doing to their teammates as well in front of them. Whereas defensive line, it can be more of a just still pin your ears back a little bit. And you don't necessarily have to go all the way down to 75%, but you can go like 85, 90% while still maintaining good health. You're going forward, not backwards. Whereas offensive line, if you're doing any sort of pass pro or anything like that, of course, you're going to your back foot out of instinct and out of rep. That's what you're supposed to do. So you want to be cautious about your health and whatnot. So there's definitely a point to be made. It's where I kind of make sure I don't overreact to when depth especially kind of lacks. It's like, look, they're not going 100%. They're, especially with depth pieces where they're concerned about making the roster, they're going to make sure their health is there because you have to be available in order to even make the roster as it is. So yeah, there's kind of that natural balance to be had. And there's definitely an argument and kind of a point to be said that, hey, they're not going 100%. So how much can we really weigh with this evaluation and what they're doing on the field, day in, day out? Because yes, health is the most important thing with those guys, and they have to be a little extra cautious with what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's got to be so hard to be a deaf player coming, especially to a really good team like the Bills, or you look at teams around the league like the Chiefs, Bengals, and you've seen some situations like specifically with the Chiefs and Kelsey a few weeks ago, right? So that cornerback, I don't recall his name, but he's a deaf corner, might make the roster, tried to make a play on the ball. Kelsey punched him in the face. The reason I bring that up is because for a deaf player, you only have so much potential, so much time to show what you're capable of to make a roster. And for you, it is this very thin and difficult to navigate line, at least in my opinion, where you want to show out, but you can't show. It almost is like you can't show out fully because you run the risk of hurting somebody. And there's been examples in training camps from all teams in the past of deaf players maybe making a mistake, going too hard, hurting somebody unintentionally. And that is a recipe for disaster. But at the same time, you got to show who you are. You got to show your ability and I guess you can call it the balance in training camp to be able to go in there and not hurt anybody, but still be productive. So for the deaf players, I empathize with a lot of guys that might be rookies, undrafted free agents that go in there and they try to make a play and they have to hold back. Like, I know that's got to be a very tricky balance. But yeah, you're really not giving your, I guess you could call it your all if you're a starter, because there's no sense in trying to hurt anybody. There's no sense in trying to make things harder for your team going forward. And I do think that while it is easy to get concerned one way or the other with offensive line, defensive line, the age-old conversation of, is our D-line really good or does our O-line just suck? I think it's just, again, you're not really seeing the full picture with really anything. It's more of like a bare bones schematic playing around. Like, that's my thing when I hear about like a Josh Allen interception or something. Now, granted, he's going to throw him in the regular season, but I also think sometimes you're trying a new route. Sometimes you don't have the rapport with the receiver. Sometimes you just want to get the ball off to see if you can get away with something, and it doesn't work. And that's just how training camp is. So I'm glad that we've kind of had that conversation, because I feel like it's good to have these kind of neutral evaluations when you go into it. But I do want to call out just one player for being an absolute beast, and it's going to be incredibly obvious, and you all know who I'm about to say. That's Stephon Diggs. With everything that went on this offseason, and I'm the first person to tell you I've never thought it was a big deal. I absolutely swore by the fact that we were overreacting to it. Was it somewhat concerning? Yeah. But at the same time, he came back to practice, and it's been a non-story ever since, unless you are a national media person that wants to make it one. I have been a firm believer that Diggs is going to play this year, and he's going to have an exceptional year. And it is, even though I never thought it was a big deal, to see him and Josh and the chemistry they have in camp, to see how much they're essentially dominating. And yes, I know that, again, it goes to that conversation. Is the defense not prepared? I don't think so. But to see how they have this chemistry, to see how they're airing the ball out, to see Diggs just fired up, wanting to get the best out of his players, pushing people, giving the good feedback, kind of getting along with everybody on the team. That does feel really good to see. And I think it's something that bodes incredibly well for the season going forward. So, Luca, what do you think about just Josh and Diggs' rapport and really like his impact on the team?
I was with you. I really, until we heard from Diggs himself, which we knew was eventually coming, bright and early on training camp. Day one, of course, is when it actually happened, and that's not a surprise at all. But until you heard something from him, which he was going to address, I wasn't concerned until that point in time. And I kind of said this on our own show with Josh, my co-host, and I, on Bill's Chat Pod, where I talked about Diggs has never shown us anything other than he's a great person. And if you're a great person, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt until you tell me otherwise or show me otherwise. Yes, he was showing me possible signs, but like, I want to hear the words out of his mouth. I want to hear what he has to say about everything going on. Until then, I make better judgment moving forward. And everything he did, he faced the media perfectly. His responses were perfect to a point where they also seemed genuine and real and everything like that. As you said, it's not been a story ever since. And he handled that in the absolute perfect way possible. The chemistry is still there, of course, on the field with Josh. He has been outstanding this training camp to date so far. And even like moments where he's kind of motivating the team and making sure, because that was the big thing, right? He said he was angry or upset or whatever words he used to describe it. It's like he's upset because he wants to win. He's a competitor. He's an ultimate competitor. And moments like Khalil Elam then stepping up in camp, shoving Alex Austin out of the way to then get that rep, and then Diggs smoking him and letting him know how he feels about it. That's a beautiful moment, really, when it comes to like teams wanting to win and trying to build on each other. It's like Diggs showing you, it's like, you want this smoke, you're going to get it, shows him up, and then lets Khalil Elam know about it. It's like, that's what you need to see out of a guy like Diggs. Like, yes, I'm still the man. I'm showing you what's up, and then figure it out from there, because I'm sure there was more friendly conversation about it afterwards. It's just the competitors and both of them had that one-on-one moment. And it's like, that's how, iron sharpens iron, man. You got to show up. You got to be the best you are, and then try to get better off of that. So like, Diggs is doing everything right now, which is not a surprise whatsoever. He's a great human being. He's a great football player, and all signs point to positive kind of future with him, Josh Allen, the team, everything like that.
I fully agree. I'm really glad you brought this up. And I think it's something I just want to reiterate. I'll say this every single time. Fights happen in training camp. Altercations happen in training camp. This is not an unusual thing. And as far as the details that we don't know the specifics of, we only know the general gist when it comes to, when it comes to kind of the conversation that he had with McDermott, Bean and Co. I understand that there was this conversation about Diggs, but I also think you have to understand, when you are in a team full of a huge locker room with a bunch of different personalities, a bunch of different backgrounds, and a bunch of different, characters, as far as, I guess, just like, I don't want to call it work ethic or anything, but people don't always, see the same thing all the time, right? I feel like there is a very glorified view of an NFL locker room. There's a glorified view that when we see these people smiling and laughing on social media, and the Bills team posts something great, and I want them to do that, that's fine. It's all hunky dory. But then you see that it's not always that way. And my thing with the whole situation was Stefon Diggs voicing his concerns is not an abnormal thing. It was only abnormal because he got excused from practice, and it's only abnormal because he is a star player, and that's going to get attention. But I never enjoyed seeing people tear down Stefon Diggs' character, right? I don't know Stefon Diggs. You don't know Stefon Diggs. No one in this chat has, well, I can't say not met him. You might have met him at camp. He might have signed something for you. So I can't say that. But, sat down in a room and gotten to know him and gotten to know his personality. Now, what I've seen from Stefon Diggs is someone who is a leader on this team, someone who is not afraid to make his voice heard, a fantastic talent, and someone who really just wants to see the best from his players, from his team, from his coaches. And I think that's what you want on a team like this, because Stefon Diggs, being a captain, being that leader, can galvanize the rest of your team. I remember watching Bills teams of the past where it felt like they were dejected, where it felt like there was no like-mindedness, where it felt like the unity of the team just simply didn't exist. I root for teams that are like that right now. They play in the Bronx. I won't go on that path. But what I am going to say is, this team has so much heart, and with the passion that comes with winning also comes bickering, also comes argument, also comes confrontation, also comes a time where you're going to see red and your arms go up in the air because you're very dissatisfied with the result. So I will just ask people for the future, for next offseason, for if it happens during the regular season, if someone's yelling at somebody, let's not make it a story until there's an absolute reason to have to. And by that, I mean that player demands a trade and we know about it. That player doesn't show up to practice, something that is actually a valid story. But if players are bickering, it's just emotion boiling over, and that's going to happen. And I am happy to have Stefon Diggs being one of the captains of this team. I'm so excited to watch him this year. I don't need to evaluate anything about his play. We all know what he does. He speaks for himself. He plays, and his play will speak for itself. But I'm very happy that Diggs and Josh's rapport looks solid, and I think we're going to get a lot from Diggs this year. But Luka, let's transition this conversation and get a little more negative. Who has been underwhelming you in camp?
That's a great question, to be honest, because I don't know if there's like a clear-cut, straightforward answer to me. I mean, Spencer Brown's been a little underwhelming, but I don't know if that's necessarily too much of a surprise or if it's like shockingly underwhelming. It's just, I feel like you want Spencer Brown to take that next step, and it's just continuously not happening. Like, it's just Spencer Brown is continuing to be exactly what we know him to be. And it's frustrating only because then they didn't go out there and really give any competition to him at that right tackle position. And that's really what becomes underwhelming. It's like, if that becomes our downfall, then it will be more highlighted throughout the season. But it's not really because Spencer Brown's taken any sort of step back. He just hasn't taken a step forward. And that's what becomes the underwhelming part of it. It's kind of just a frustration of what are we going to do about that right tackle position? Now, will it maybe get better because you bring in an Osiris Torrance to help him be his buddy over there on the right side potentially? Yes. Like, we don't know that yet. We need to see some meaningful snaps to see if maybe that helps him out because he feels like he doesn't have to do as much as he has in the past, and he will, kind of build that trust with his right guard partner. But overall, that's kind of the first guy that comes to mind, because realistically, I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot of guys that really pop out to me as underwhelming really so far. There's just some minor disappointments, and Spencer Brown's kind of the first name that stands out to me.
Spencer Brown's situation is interesting. So I do agree that the approach to Spencer Brown was underwhelming, right? Because even though it was, I guess you can call it minuscule as far as how much talent was on the market or how much was in the draft, because it's obviously unproven, there were options there. And don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly happy to have Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to be a very good player in this league for a very long time. But I do think that this team has seemingly lacked a sense of urgency at the right tackle position. And that is equal parts concerning and equal parts optimism. Optimism in the sense that they have faith in Spencer Brown, that they do believe in the player, that his athletic upside can take him to new heights and make him a very viable right tackle in this league for, years hopefully to come. But it also means that you are putting all your chips on his number, that this is the gamble. You are rolling the dice. You are hoping he takes the step forward. You are hoping that this man can be a productive right tackle, be good in pass protection, really working with Cromer, getting his footwork down, getting the fundamentals down, learning to use his hands the right way, not holding as much, and becoming a very good pass protecting tackle in this league, or at least an average one. Because I've said before, I am fine with Spencer Brown just being an average right tackle in pass protection, because average is really all you need when you have Josh Allen and his very good pocket presence and his ability to elude rushers. You really just need someone who can essentially be a cue ball that can kind of skew people out of the way enough to give Josh Allen just enough time. But also, it's a huge risk, because if that step forward is not taken, the depth behind right tackle is incredibly thin. You were talking about Brandon Shell, who was an aging vet who did not have a very good pass protection year last season. He is a good run blocker, but so is Spencer Brown. So you're kind of getting more of the same. But also, it's just, that's an unproven. And Brandon Shell has no rapport with this offensive line. He was a free agent, signed in like kind of the middle of free agency, beginning of the summer. And while he's getting his, reps with the second and third, I don't know about him with the first team. And when you talk about David Quessenberry, he's been on the team before. Maybe there's a little more optimism. But again, the fact that they are kind of calling upon Spencer Brown and what they want him to be to take the reps from David Quessenberry, and that you haven't really heard about Quessenberry being the right tackle, that concerns me. And Spencer Brown the other day, as Joe Marino reported, looked to be in some discomfort, looked to be kind of like in pain. And obviously he was on an electric bike like 20 minutes later going to the hall. So it could have just been a back spasm, could have just been like got dinged up a little bit. But that revealed something. It is an incredibly thin line of error if Spencer Brown gets hurt. Incredibly thin. Josh Allen is your most important asset. Josh Allen's arm is worth $258 million. If Spencer Brown goes down, you are essentially opening up a door for any sort of edge rusher to be able to get by and attack that arm. And I don't want to see it. But I am going to hope that they saw something we didn't see, that their investment into Spencer Brown is justified, that at the very least he takes a step forward, can be serviceable, and that if he's serviceable enough, but something that we still feel we can improve, but it's not a detriment to the team, that maybe they explore the option of moving on or maybe finding some competition. Or he makes me eat crow and he has a great year. I don't know. And that wild card, I agree, Luca, is something that I do think is a bit underwhelming, because it feels like they could have maybe invested more. But yeah, I do think that's worth talking about, and hopefully the bets that they've placed on Spencer Brown pay off in the future. So
yeah.
Oh,
yeah, no, and just one more, sorry, like just to add to it, it's the X factor, or just the confusion with how they've handled it too, is this front office and Sean McDermott are kind of the type of individuals that don't really take gambles. They kind of almost play it a little bit more on the safe side when it comes to positional depth and things like that. Over the years, they've shown that. So it's just interesting, we'll call it, how they've handled the Spencer Brown and right tackle position, because it's kind of the polar opposite of everything else. Like they are not, playing it safe, bringing in a veteran guy that they know has legitimate right tackle experience and stuff like that. Shell kind of is that, but it's like he's on the back end of his career where it's not someone that you can really lean on to do that, as you said perfectly. So it's just interesting how they've handled that overall, because it goes against their normal kind of operations and how they've handled the entire roster build up until this point.
Yeah, and I know one thing is that they love athletes. Like they
Yeah.
love the project athlete. They are a very big like I can fix him kind of team. It's like, you know, when you watch like an old like sitcom or something and there was always that girl who's just like I can fix him, he can change. That's what the Bills are. And Spencer Brown like has all the athletic potential in the world, but he also has a lingering back issue. For a guy his size, that's a huge concern. So it is a bit out of character to see that they very minimally address that position. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy that they attacked other parts of the offensive line. I did think left guard was a huge need. I did think like maybe bringing competition and some athletic upside at right guard was a huge need. You know, having Bates move around is a very big plus to this offensive line. But you really are banking on Brown being a serviceable enough right tackle. And I just hope it pays off, because I feel like a lot of the potential of this offensive line, not just for protecting Allen, but in run sets where you could maybe get away with moving him around because he's a really good downfield blocker, that kind of goes out the window a bit. And if Shell can replicate that, great. But I don't know if he's still capable of doing so. I need to see it. And if a player somehow sees this show, again, I always welcome being wrong. I'm happy to look like an idiot on camera. I'm happy to be proven wrong. This is not me taking personal attacks. It's just me saying, like, on paper, it is a big kind of worry. And I do understand the concerns for offensive line. But I don't really have anyone else to say is underwhelming. I think, you know, Shakir's had flashes of good and bad in this camp. So it's not really fair to say he's been fully underwhelming as much as he's not really consistent. I know he muffed a punt yesterday when they were doing those practicing, and I know he's been in kind of the return battle, but it seems like Hardy's winning it. And Shakir's made some nice plays, but also had some drops. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on Khalil Shakir and kind of his development in year two?
Yeah, underwhelming might be a bit of a stretch, as you're saying perfectly. Like, it's not like something where I go, yeah, it's just frustrating at this point, or it's underwhelming. It's like, no, Shakir is just showing it's year two. It's his first year as a full-time pro, really. Like, rookie years, you're not a full-time pro yet. You didn't get the full offseason kind of focus at your craft. So this is the first time he's really been able to do that. And it still just hasn't come all together. But again, he's still young. He's got a lot of time, things like that. You would like to see it. Of course, you want to see the optimism in everyone, but it doesn't always pan out that way. You always have to kind of have that reality check. There's a reason he was picked when he was in the draft, stuff like that. Like, the funny thing is, until he shows me otherwise, I just get, not that they're the same player or anything. It's just like Kobe Listenby to me. It's like, until you show me that it works, like, that's kind of where I'm like, you could be another one of those. And it just is what it is. It's a day 3 pick. It figured, they figured out they may not. Like, you had your Christian Benford that seems to be working out in your day 3. Your Khalil Shakir isn't. It's like, that's still technically kind of a success in the NFL draft. Hopefully he can turn it around and things, figure it out and just go on with his life. But I'm not exactly going to be stressing out over it, especially when you have Deontay Hardy, you have Trent Sherfield, you have other options that can kind of fill that need on offense. And then it's like the return game, Hardy as well, like you mentioned. And then even like they bring in Andy Isabella. I am a Team Isabella guy. I love him. I don't know why, I just always have. But like, you have other options there too that have experience as well. So it's not like anything is vital on him when it comes to a starting role in this offense or even a major piece in this offense. You would like it to be there. You want availability and just different options. But overall, to say it it's a little bit of a stretch to call him underwhelming at this point in time.
I agree with that. And I'm really glad you brought up kind of the late round thing, because it's so funny that this team has actually been fairly good at getting late round talent, that there's almost an expectation that the 5th, 4th, 6th rounders, whatever we get, will be like contributing players. And it's like, that is such a toss up and it's such a gamble that it's not always going to be the case. But we've just gotten used to guys like Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace or like other late round picks actually contributing and having good like time with Buffalo. So I think it's so funny you bring that up. But one thing I'm happy about with Bean and Co is that they didn't really rely on Shakir taking that step forward to be a pivotal component of this offense, right? It feels like Shakir is allowed to make mistakes and Shakir is allowed to, flash when he's ready to flash and kind of get used to it and acclimate slowly, because you see who else they brought in and you see kind of the fact that they did want to address their receiving talent, really wanted to give slot options, not make Shakir have too much on his plate and overwhelm him and hope he works out. Like, they essentially didn't do what they did with right tackle to wide receiver. They addressed wide receiver. They brought plenty of depth options and they brought guys that are versatile, just like Shakir is. So you could maybe have Hardy line up in the slot. You could maybe have Hardy in motion and even getting direct handoffs. Could have him be on the boundary. You could have Sherfield be on the boundary. You could have Kincaid be on the, like Thomas brought this up the other day, and it's a great point. there's not really too much pressure on Shakir to lose his job or to not be on this roster, because I do think the versatility of Khalil Shakir gives him that leg up, and they're just waiting for him to be able to take that step forward and get to a point where he's ready for that role without having to do too much. But at the same time, there are growing pains still with him. You are still seeing some drops. You are still seeing some miscues. I know last year his blocking just was not good. I know there are worries about him, but I do still think that, one, adding in your Dalton Kincaid, being able to have him take that TE1, TE2, whatever role, and then opening up a room or a spot in the room, wide receiver room for Khalil Shakir, means that you could still employ him without putting too much on his plate. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does. I have a lot of faith in him. I thought he was really good at Boise. I think he showed in time with Buffalo, even though it's been brief, some flashes of brilliance, some ability to get open down the field, some ability to get open in the middle. I really just think, like, similar to how I feel about Kaiir Elam, which we'll get to in a second, like the real struggle is just kind of transitioning to the NFL and getting used to the speed of the league, the playbook that you have to now learn, building chemistry in what is a very crowded wide receiver room, which I don't think is talked about enough, because let's be real. When you have a Stephon Diggs, when you have a Gabe Davis, and you have a Dawson Knox, and you are the new guy, and I can make the same comparison for James Cook in the receiving game last year too. When there are these established veterans in the room and you're the new guy, even though you're going to get reps in training camp, even though you're going to get this opportunity to get the ball, it's hard to build that rapport. It's hard to get that chemistry going, because there is a lot that you kind of have to fight against, and a lot less opportunity to prove yourself, which is why I brought up those depth players before. So, I mean, when it comes to Khalil Shakir, or I'll transition this conversation to the CB2 battle with Kaiir Elam, it does feel like you are fighting with a lot of people to get the opportunity. And that in turn means every flash you get is maximized, but so too is every mistake. So, Luco, I'll ask you as we transition, what do you think about Kaiir Elam in this battle, or really just the CB2 battle in general?
The drum I've been beating when it comes to the cornerback 2 position, and Kaiir Elam a little bit more specifically, is, look, I think you're spot on when it comes to catching up with speed, and that's both mentally as well as physically. I think there's a lot that goes into it, especially at the corner position. That's one of those few kind of reactionary, twitchy positions in the National Football League, where you can do all the game prep you want, everything like that, but the split second of reaction you need to be able to make a decision on is unique. Wide receiver and corner are very, very twitchy positions where things happen in a millisecond, and all of a sudden you could be from on his hip to kind of five steps behind him, just like that. So it's a unique position for Kaiir Elam to get up to speed to. He's still a very young gentleman and stuff like that. So it's like, I can live with him just still kind of learning through the ranks. You have a Trey White who's kind of looked good, and is built up an optimism that he won't probably get back to 100% of what he was, but if he can get back to 85, 90%, and your corner 2 position is kind of a situation where you maybe have Kaiir Elam, but then a Christian Benford who can still thrive at just being that safer option, and then they lean on Dane Jackson if they need to. It's like you are building time, as you said. It's a crowded room with a lot of different options there that I can live with giving him more time to figure it out, because it is a lot to take on. Kaiir Elam needs time to develop that, and he seems like he has the confidence to want to learn and build. That same example I brought up with Diggs obviously is an example of why Kaiir Elam wants it, but I don't need it to happen immediately. Like, it's not like Kaiir Elam needs to win it now or he's a bust. That's overkill. Like, if you can, let's put it this way. If you get serviceable reps out of Kaiir Elam this season, and you also get starting serviceable reps out of Christian Benford this season, that corner draft is a massive success that we had last year. And that's the key point of this. It's like, you don't need him to be an absolute stud out the gate. You don't need him to be a stud right now. You just need him to be a serviceable pro right now. And it will come in time, hopefully, that he can continue to build and develop and eventually, hopefully, become that stud. But that takes time. It's not these Patrick Petersons, these even Trey Whites, these guys, they do not grow on trees. You don't come in and become an instant all-pro. Like, you get your 5 non-all-pros with your 1 all-pro, and that's even me being generous. So yeah, I can take time and let him build and learn the mental speed as well as physical speed, because he has the athleticism to do it. It's just, it takes time to let that develop and kind of age like a fine wine, almost, in a way. So realistically, I'm not over the moon kind of waiting to kind of jump on top of him and call him all of a sudden a problem or a bust. It's like, no, that takes time. And it's, I think, maybe everyone, you see once in a while someone going 60 and a 35. It's like, hey, let's just go 5 over the speed limit and be excited about it, but give him time and still just get to the destination we need to go in due time.
You nailed that. And I completely agree with that sentiment. So it's important to remember one thing. He is getting reps with the ones and he's having plenty of competition, but he is getting more and more reps and he's looking better and better. But we drafted a cornerback 2 in the first round. Now, being that it was the first round, there are obviously massive expectations for that rookie because why would you use the first round pick on someone you don't foresee starting for you in the future? You absolutely need to. But Kaiir Elam, again, played in kind of a system where he was a press man corner, wasn't tasked. He was playing, he could play anything. Like he was playing zone, he was playing anything, but his bread and butter was press man. That was what he was known for. And he transitions now to a more zone heavy defense. But now you're starting to see with McDermott at the helm. And I don't know if this was a future plan. I don't know if this is something that kind of predicted would happen, but they are allowing him to get that chance to kind of show his physicality, which is what you're going to need when you play some very speedy receivers in the league who are very good at getting leverage. He'll go up against Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, or the likes of Garrett Wilson, or maybe even if you want to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, if he still has the step. That's something you need. But they wanted him to be a versatile corner as well. And I think that just comes with learning a new playbook, adjusting to NFL speed, being able to kind of overcome that mental hurdle and getting used to the league, getting used to the playbook you're in, getting used to the scheme you're in. That takes time. And with the depth we have at cornerback, again, Luka, you nailed it. I am A-okay if Kaiir Elam is splitting first CB2 reps, as in, like, obviously Trey White's got the one spot. But if Kaiir Elam's got to come in with them and maybe share some reps with Benford and both are productive, you drafted them in the same draft. That's a win. Who cares? Like that's still a win, and you're still getting production at that position. And also you're getting less reps, but still the same level of production, meaning less wear and tear on each player that you have under team control for a few more years. So I think with the Kaiir Elam conversation, I still think he's going to win the CB2 job. I think it's all building up to him getting that spot. He said it himself. He was feeling it in his first few weeks. He got hurt. It slowed him down. He kind of had to readjust to the speed, got it going towards the end, had a great wild card game. I think Kaiir Elam is poised to take that step forward this year. I think he's going to shock a lot of people. And I think his skill set is incredibly valuable to this defense this year, especially one that is going to be more aggressive as a whole. Luka, any final thoughts on Kaiir Elam before we move on?
Yeah, I would love to see him win it as well. I'm not willing to kind of jump on the bandwagon quite yet, or at least put my money down that he's going to win it at this point. It would be exciting. The key there too is, this is kind of a shout out to my co-host Josh. He's been saying this point that's really, really good, where Trey White and then the two safeties, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, haven't been on the field together since Thanksgiving 2021. And the reason that they played those individuals with Dane Jackson is they all have this crazy trust among knowing where they're going to be. And I think the X factor of who wins that cornerback 2 spot is, who do those other 3 trust the most in coverage, knowing where they're going to be? And you have to earn that. And that's the thing. Like, people were frustrated with Kaiir Elam and his, less than ideal usage last season. But it's like, hey, if Poyer's out there trying to, he's already dealing with a different safety partner, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a different corner now, it's like you need him to be able to trust the guys he's with, because he's kind of the leader now of that secondary. Now that you do have Trey White back, you do have Micah Hyde back with Poyer now also back. It's like, who do they trust the most out there? And I think McDermott cares a lot about that kind of point, as well as him himself trusting who's out there. So I think that's the biggest kind of pull on who's going to win that corner job. Of course, you go with who has the best ability to win that job and just the raw talent and abilities, but you need to care about the other individuals they're going to be out there doing battle with and who they trust as well. So that's a big point to kind of like look at a little bit. And if Dane Jackson wins the job because that's who those 3 trust the most at just understanding what they need him to do, so be it. And you just have to move forward with that and then figure it out from there.
Absolutely. And McDermott values leadership, and he values the voices of his leaders. He's going to listen to what they have to say. You've seen him rely on vets, over rookies a lot. Obviously not every time, but when it comes to the likes of Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, he's going to hear what they have to say. And if they tell him Dane Jackson's the guy, Dane Jackson's going to be the guy. But where I also see the benefit for Kaiir Elam and Benford, although Benford has, I would say, Benford got called upon a bit more early on. I don't know if I had to look at the actual snaps for the end of the season. But what I think benefits both Elam and Benford, and maybe even the depth pieces if they do make the roster, is having Micah Hyde back. Because yes, Jordan Poyer was there commanding the secondary, but Jordan Poyer was the only true veteran of the safety because DeMar Hamlin was getting his first starting reps. Now Hyde's back. you have both of them in tandem. If they do want to rely on the physical upside of Elam Benford tandem, or maybe just keep Jackson as depth, or maybe in a world where they might trade Dane Jackson because he's on a 1-year contract, looks good in camp, and they might get some value out of it, then I see the potential for the two to take even further steps forward, knowing that you have an all-pro safety behind you to help you out, to call things out for you, to kind of make the transition to the game easier. I'm not criticizing Damar Hamlin's football knowledge at all, but I do think Damar Hamlin was in a learning position himself, being a first-time starting NFL safety, where he was usually relying on the guidance of Hyde and Poyer and not getting too many starting reps, but really last year getting thrown into that position because of Hyde's injury. Now, with both of the guys back, it feels like to me, these younger guys are going to get the opportunity to, one, learn from the safeties, learn what they like, learn what benefits them, but also have them on the field with them so that there is this level of comfort and confidence that comes with your game and maybe helps you flourish going forward. So we will see. It is a very interesting battle, but I am going to say that it's Elam's job to lose. I know Dane's the vet. I very much relied on veterans. We'll talk about it when we get to middle linebacker, but I think Elam was your first round pick. I think they want him to take those steps forward. They are putting him in every position to take them. He's looking much better in camp than when he started. I think he's only going to improve, and I think Benford will be there right beside him. Jackson, if he's still on the field, will be there right beside him, but I think they want Elam to be that guy, so that's who I'm going to pick. And real fast, Luka, just got to say this. I think Trey White's 100%. I know the ACL tear concerned people. I think Trey White's going to play at a very high level this year. I'm really excited to watch him. When Trey White gets burned by Stephon Diggs in practice, I don't look at that as an indictment on Trey White. I look at that as Stephon Diggs is still a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Like, it's going up against like the fire. It's really one of the best receivers you can face. And to me, in a one-on-one rep, you're not always going to win. And as long as Trey White's getting his reps where he earns them and he wins and he has good coverage, that's what I want to see. And I think Trey White going up against Diggs in camp, now that he's fully healthy, now that he has the juice, the confidence to tweak, move around on his knee, to be able to cut, I feel like going up against the Diggs when you're trying to get over that mental hurdle still is only beneficial and is only going to improve his play this year. So I have very high hopes for Trey White and Kaiir Elam and really the entire secondary this year. But there is one question mark in this defense that does need to be addressed, and that's middle linebacker. And as we've seen, it seems that Baylon Spector might have dropped out of the race, at least for now. While I was very complimentary of him last week and I saw the potential, and we had the conversation about Jordan Poyer complimenting him and people very complimentary of his game, the coaching staff has kind of seemed to give him more reps with the twos, and it seems like Bernard and Dotson are your matchup for the middle linebacker position. There are benefits and cons to both. So, Luka, who do you think's the front runner in this race right now, and who would you like to see if they are not winning it right now?
So I think it's Dodson's to lose at this point. When we saw him come out yesterday with the green dot, that was the overwhelming thing to me, where it's like, okay, the mindset is it's his to lose. And on top of that, I don't think Terrell Bernard has showed anything that really gives him a massive step up on Dotson on top of it. Like, he doesn't have elite athleticism to the point where it's overwhelmingly better than Dotson or anything like that. Like, he is still very good in his own right at certain things. He is an athletic linebacker in his own right as well. But it's like, hey, Dodson's the vet. He understands the defense and understands McDermott's kind of message with what he wants to do. He's been in the system longer, and he's not really a step behind anything that Bernard offers, overwhelmingly so. So I just don't know how Bernard kind of gets the nod over Dotson at this point. I just don't see how that happens, barring anything that happens roster movement wise or, injuries and things like that. I think it's Dotson's to lose at this point in time because Bernard doesn't stand out among, on top of Dotson with anything that he does. It's not a detriment to him. I just think Dotson's been around longer. He's still good in his own right. You just need that guy to be, average above average. You still have a lot of all-pro players around him. It's not quintessential to have, an all-pro in its own right at middle linebacker. As long as he's standing next to Milano, he just needs to be able to do his job well. And he has Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde behind him doing their jobs very well. Hopefully it's like, just be serviceable, understand what the defense is trying to do, and be dependable for McDermott when it comes to getting the message in and just getting everyone else in a position to succeed and just go from there. So Dotson to lose at this point in time, and I just don't see how that changes throughout the entire preseason.
I agree. And I did an episode a few weeks ago, and anyone who's a regular on the show can kind of attest to it. And RJ here, Dotson was all over the place yesterday. I do think he really worked on his pass coverage as well. I mean, I hope he would, because if Jermaine Edmonds isn't there, like, he's definitely knows he has the opportunity to get that job, and he's going to bust his ass to get it. And another comment from Dirty Jersey. Dotson, clear favorite in my opinion. He has the best command of the defense from what I've heard / read. All right. Well, I appreciate those insights. And I do agree that it's Dotson's job to lose. On a few weeks ago when I did my show, I did say that Dotson, in my opinion, was the front runner just for the fact that he is a veteran. I think McDermott likes to call upon veterans when there's very stern question marks when it comes to a position or what a player is going to do for your defense. I think Terrell Bernard is in an interesting position from going from an absolute ghost that we forgot about to actually getting the opportunity to be serviceable in this defense and make some key plays. I have said that Terrell Bernard has a very good ability to rush gaps, and I think that's going to be useful in a very aggressive attacking defense that McDermott runs. And I do think that if you are calling upon Bernard or Dotson to be just a guy that can kind of clean up the mess, clean up the runs, attack the defensive lines, scraps, I guess if you could call it, where they're really blowing things up at the line of scrimmage and you can come in and finish the job, that's very valuable. And I think the pass coverage, which I'll get to in a next topic, because there's reason to believe that it's going to get easier for your linebacker. It's not that it doesn't matter, but I don't think it's as heavily favored to be your middle linebacker's responsibility in its entirety when there's another player and parts of the defense that might be able to take that off your hands. But going for right now and who my front runner is, it is Dotson. And I think it's just because I think Dotson has room to improve. I think he can improve, but I also think you know what you're going to get with him. And Dotson has a very high motor. He's very physical. He's very aggressive and attack minded, which is what you need in this defense, especially when you need to stop the run, when you don't want to let them get chunks of yards down the field. I think he's very good at cleaning up that defensive line, interruption at running plays and even in pass. I just want to see what he's capable of in coverage. But if people are saying that he looks better in camp, I have reasons to be optimistic that he could show that in the regular season, especially if his plate is a little bit lighter and they are not tasking him with the Tremaine Edmonds level of pass coverage knowledge, at least not immediately. So I do think it is Dotson's job right now. But what I will say is Dotson potentially winning this job doesn't mean that I don't think Bernard's seeing the field. I think Bernard's going to see the field a lot. I think what you might actually end up seeing is like how we talk about positionless football. There might be a positionless, or not positionless, but kind of no arbitrary count to how many snaps each one is going to get in a game, but rather letting the game dictate who fits that scenario the best. And if we are talking about a team with maybe an injury-ridden O-line or a team that's not capable of getting the ball out, maybe no vertical threats, so a team that just doesn't really give you any scares when it comes to air raiding offense, right? I think if you're trying to overload someone's offensive line and really send pressure, that's going to be a scenario where you have Bernard in, I think, every time, because Bernard's a missile. Like, that is one of the best parts of his game. Like, I think just the same way you see Milano rush passers is the way you're going to see Bernard do it this year. But if we're talking about maybe a more lax four-man rush, too high look, we want coverage, then I think you'll have Dotson in, where if they decide to run, I think Dotson can get up there. He's bigger and he might be able to clean the play up and make the tackle. But also, if he has improved his pass coverage ability, I have a bit more faith in him to do that in this defense and play it serviceably. So, Luca, any thoughts on this middle linebacker battle before we move on to a very interesting topic?
No, your wrap up point there was pretty spot on. Like, I do think it's going to be kind of personnel based. The Bills have shown that they're not afraid to rotate out. They're not afraid at any position really to have a rotation other than quarterback for that matter, or wide receiver one. It's generally Diggs. So in the defense, it wouldn't be a shock to me at all if it's personnel based, if it's package based, things like that, where, as everything you said, they want to be aggressive. They want to, instead of just sitting back in a Tampa 2 system all the time and just basically being a base nickel Tampa 2 majority of the time, maybe they do want to change up looks, change up personnel to do different things and everything like that. And Dotson might excel in that base nickel kind of look, but you do want to bring in a Bernard if you need a little bit more athleticism and just that missile out there, as you mentioned perfectly, to just attack the first thing they see. Because if he has that quicker first step and just is able to attack whatever, you're not going to be exposed as long as you're being aggressive and trying to get through that line right off the snap. Whereas if you're just sending your four and stuff like that, maybe you don't want that missile out there because he's going to grab on a double move or whatever the situation might be and get roasted because of it. So yeah, I do think there might be a little bit more of a rotation, and Dotson winning the job isn't a detriment to anything. It's just, you might just see him out there when you're more in your base looks and stuff like that, just because there's a comfortability with him and whatnot. But yeah, positionless football is kind of at an all-time high with the the Bills right now, both sides of the ball. There's a lot of different pieces that can do a lot of different things at different kind of roles and just figure it out from there, so that you can't just do one thing really, really well. They're trying to do a lot of different things still well in its own right, and then just match it up perfectly week in, week out, depending on who they're playing.
Yeah, and that's something I want to see from this defense, because I think McDermott is going to be the type of guy that doesn't just sit back and trust his scheme. Like with Frazier, the one criticism I had is there were times where it felt like he was overly dependent on the schematics and not really trying to adjust for in-game scenarios. And granted, they were a very stubborn, stout defense. And I know we go back to the Bengal game as a huge indictment on Frazier, although I think beyond the first quarter, they actually did start to settle down a bit. You can blame the offense for maybe keeping them on the field for too long, as well as injuries for a lot of what went wrong in that game. But they still held it down, honestly, as best as they could as it carried on. But with McDermott, I feel like you are going to see some more in-game tweaking, some more scenario-based defense where it's what am I seeing in front of me versus what is my defense capable of doing this entire game? How do we pre-plan it? I think that ability to kind of bring guys in when you need them versus having a guy sit in the set spot and maybe get mutilated in a game if it doesn't work out and the matchup's brutal, like that is a very big difference, something that I think could really make the Bills defense stand out even more, even if these linebacker prospects that we are talking about right now aren't the sure thing and maybe will never be the sure thing. I don't know. But Terrell Bernard, I do think there is an upside for him too, because like you said, it's the athleticism. I do think he is a very good athlete. And I don't think 6'1", 225 is too concerning. Like it's not as big as Dotson, but I do think as long as you have the form, as long as you have the juice, like you could still make tackles in open space. You could still make tackles in coverage. You're still capable of being a serviceable linebacker, because the similar thing I said about Dorian Williams, which by the way, yeah, eat crow. I guess they really don't want him in that middle linebacker battle, but you know what? Def for Milano is always okay. And if that's how he's got to start, that's how he's got to start. But with Bernard, if he is just capable of playing above his size, if they see 6'1", 225 as really whatever, but he's making those key plays, then that's fine by me. So yeah, I think it's going to be a mixed bag of who goes on the field based on what the situation is. And I like that, because then it's just kind of like, well, yeah, we could throw anything we really want at you. It's not as predictable. Or maybe we can disguise things and we'll put Bernard in to make you think we're running some sort of aggressive play. We'll have Bernard going pass coverage. Maybe you chalk things up to be short and he can come up. Like, I don't know. But that gives you a lot to play with. And I think this team, both offensively and defensively this year, are valuing having the versatility to run a bunch of different concepts that maybe teams, especially in a more stacked division, a more stacked conference, haven't really seen from them, which excites me and I think gives me a lot of optimism for some really interesting, fun aggression coming from both ends that I think will make them a formidable team and a contender this year. But we brought it up before, and I want to bring this up now and go a little deeper into it. It's McDermott's defense this year, man. Pressure, 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 and the dime package, as I have it listed on my notes. Luka, we saw yesterday, Taylor Rapp was on the field with both safeties, and Taylor Rapp lined up at linebacker, which is sick. Now, you all know the Patton and Greg Thompson term. That is hashtag thick dime. Guess what? That term that was once a fantasy is becoming a reality and something we could see this year. Do we know how often they'll run it? No, but they are practicing it. Taylor Rapp getting in that kind of look, that dime look, is so encouraging for that point I made earlier about this defense being versatile and unpredictable. So, Luka, give me your thoughts on really everything with McDermott's defense, and specifically, if you want to allude to it, Taylor Rapp going into those positions and being set up to play in that spot.
Yeah, I would love to talk about Taylor Rapp, to be quite honest, because Taylor Rapp, and I said this last night on our show, Taylor Rapp is more and more kind of reminding me. There's a lot of Cardinals polls I'm getting lately when it comes to what's going on with the Bills. And one of them is like how they utilized Dion Buchanan when they first had him and converted him into that dollar linebacker, or what they kind of termed as a slinebacker. And Taylor Rapp becomes more and more something like that, where it's like, yeah, he has the physical size to play as a small, undersized linebacker, but still give you the production you need there, having the elite athleticism. You can bring him out even if you need to as a nickel linebacker or a nickel back as a whole, and then you have him as a safety if you need to. He kind of, I use a term a lot, if you're positionless on offense as an offensive weapon, you're not actually a position-based player. You'll see a lot of players that are moved around. A Dalton Kincaid could be maybe classified as an OW, an offensive weapon. Taylor Rapp is becoming a DW. He's becoming a defensive weapon where he can be out there. You can rotate whatever it is on your defensive line and all of a sudden create a completely different look on defense. All of a sudden, based on after one single snap and seeing the personnel on offense, you can move him to safety, nickel back, whatever you need to do, put him at linebacker, as we're saying here. It's like you can do anything with this guy, and he seems to excel at it, or at least be very good at it. So it's like, he is a fascinating player to have on this defense and opens up a lot of avenues to be more aggressive and just let McDermott do what he seems to want to do and be extremely aggressive, focus on basically pressure and making something happen at the line of scrimmage and behind the line of scrimmage, so that you can, not depend on kind of sitting in a scheme and coverage and just force turnovers, force sacks, things like that at a higher rate, so that hopefully you can get your defense off the field more and more, and not just kind of have long sustained drives against, and then just when the back's against them, hopefully get out of it in the red zone, which seems to be what they excelled at before. Now it's like, hey, let's be a little bit more aggressive. Let's have guys like Taylor Rapp out there who can be athletic while still filling a role at linebacker, undersized a little bit, and then figure it out from there to create turnovers and opportunities from there. It's an exciting thing. Taylor Rapp is extremely exciting. He could be an X factor for this defense this season for sure.
Yeah, kind of like how I addressed Sherfield before being the 1 year with potential for more years to come in. I think just given the cap situation the Bills had, by the way, I think you saw a few free agency signings that are 1 year deals, but if they ball out, you're going to see them go further. And I think that's Taylor Rapp. I think that's Poona Ford. I think that's Trent Sherfield. I think those guys could end up being more than just a single year, unless they're bad. Fingers crossed they're not. But when we talk about Taylor Rapp, I love the versatility he brings. I love the fact that you can get him to go both ways. I love the fact that you could use him in red zone packages too. This team has always been a very good red zone defense. But imagine having another coverage guy that can play both ways there. I just find that to be so valuable and just give you so much more to work with. And McDermott has expressed, and the team has expressed, what they care about the most is points. They don't give a damn about yards. They don't care about your running backs. What they care about is keeping you out of the end zone. If you sustain a drive that takes 5 minutes and you try to really take advantage of the zone, but not, this team bend, don't break. They'll stretch themselves out. Maybe they'll give you the middle of the field, but they're not going to offer you the deep play. And you move the ball down the field, but you end up just kicking a field goal. That's a win for the Bills, especially with the offense that they have. So when you add in a guy like Taylor Rapp and you add in some defensive tackle depth and you see like Sean McDermott adding this aggressive defensive mind to it, I feel you're going to get this very fun balance of both, where again, it's a game day situation. It's dictated by what you're seeing on the field. But if this team really wants to get crazy with how they cover you, and you're going up against the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Tua, whoever. Yes, I did mention Tua. I think we got to respect his game. Then I see a world where they're going to maybe send even less pressure and have more people drop into coverage and just give you nightmares, or at the least some very fun, crazy dynamic pre-snap looks where Taylor Rapp might be looking like he's dropping into coverage, then comes right at you. Like, this is the excitement I have for a Sean McDermott defense. And it's why when people saw him take over and people saw Leslie Frazier leave and people kind of sleep on the Bills defense and they look at the hole in the linebacker room and look at the uncertainty, from the outside looking in, you could see all those things, and they are valid criticisms. It's not to say it's going to work, but it's to say that they don't really see the other side of it, where this is a guy who has called defenses for Super Bowl teams, where he has shown he is capable to man systems where he doesn't have Tremaine Edmonds, but maybe more undersized linebackers, where he shows he's able to get the most out of his guys in the secondary and really be a coverage guru and know how to really play to the game. I think now that he is the guy at the helm, the one that's calling this defense, and you add in versatile pieces like Taylor Rapp and maybe even Terrell Bernard if his coverage ability steps forward, I am really excited to see what he brings. But also, if they don't want to go into coverage as much and maybe they want to send the hounds, I am so excited to see how Sean McDermott figures out his blitzes this year, what he brings, what he throws at offenses, how he mixes it up. Like, that's the thing. You have the opportunity to be pressure heavy or not pressure heavy whenever you feel like doing so, rather than just sitting in your base nickel and kind of showing the same look the entire game, and maybe having very good offensive minds like Mike McDaniel learn how to match up running backs to Taron Johnson and knock them over in the middle of the field. So, Luca, you have any more thoughts on this?
No, the excitement is shared over here. Like, I'm excited for the prospect of something completely different that we haven't seen the past few years. And everything you said about McDermott and what he does defensively is spot on. And that's where it's like we've dealt with Leslie Frazier, and I don't want to say dealt in a negative way at all. It was a very productive defense. It was very high end defense and everything like that. But changing it up because it just hasn't been working in the biggest moments and figuring out something a little bit more for this defense is exactly what it potentially needs. and bringing in a lot of just versatile pieces like a Rap, and then trying to like promote Bernard more so and stuff. Everything that you brought up was spot on. There's a lot of different things that could happen. And like, you can't be just kind of a sit back safety anymore in this defense. You can't just be, a single position player. You need to be capable of doing 2-3 different things so that when things change on the fly and when we need to do things week in, week out, and it changes by the week, it's like you can pick that up within that week's game plan and then execute it on Sundays or Mondays or whenever it is. So it's exciting. It's very exciting kind of defensively. And I feel like it's gone a little under wraps just because of off-season storylines and whatnot. But Taylor Rapp could really be, that's good. Taylor Rapp could really, and I'll say it one more time, be that X factor for this defense, because it's exciting to see what he's already doing in preseason.
100%. And I mean, one thing I really enjoy about McDermott at the helm, and the thing I could see with it too, is a lot of teams have the kind of game plan against the Bills, right? Like they see their defense, and the defense relied heavily on the talent of all pro safeties. And I think what you're going to get from McDermott is, one, wrinkles that change the way teams have to prep for you, and this kind of unpredictable nature of the Bills defense, where now these teams that have had years of footage with Leslie Frazier calling the plays and maybe his arrangements, now McDermott might give you the wrinkles that give you something different. And these teams don't know how to prepare for it as adequately. And I think that really benefits you going into week 1 in MetLife Stadium, where you have to face a veteran Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers with some very talented weapons to boot. Now, I think you have the opportunity to really do some damage defensively, because Rodgers, one, has been a consistently slow starter in the league. And that's not an indict. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But there are stats to support that week 1 is usually a feel it out week for him, because 0-1 is not the end of the world, and I get it. But how nice would it be to just see this team come out with this defense and completely stifle Nate Hackett and Aaron Rodgers with some really interesting, creative, exotic blitzes, some different coverages, some pre-snap motions that just change the way you expect this defense to run in a game, and then have them completely stymied. Like, that to me is something that I really think it's not just me being excited and optimistic. I think it's realistic. I think the dime, whatever they run it, however much they run it, is realistic. I think exotic blitzes or disguised whatever, it's realistic. So I think fans should be very encouraged with having Sean McDermott call the plays. I know I am, and I'm really excited to watch Taylor Rapp this year and see what he could bring to the table. And I just want to ask you one more thing, Luca, but we did talk about the defensive line before, but I feel like we didn't give it enough love. So what do you think just about the way the defensive line is constructed right now? And what do you think about, the potential for it in a McDermott defense?
Another underrated thing that happened was bringing in Leonard Floyd. And I think what Leonard Floyd does is, in the immediate, when most likely Von is not going to be out there, Leonard Floyd is a proven pass rusher and a proven edge presence in general that has shown that he can play at a high level throughout his previous seasons. And it's like, you bring him in, you have him opposite of Groot, opposite of Rousseau. You have AJ Epinesa, who might potentially be taking yet another step forward and whatnot. You have these 3 guys so that when Von Miller does come back, you are 4 deep of legitimate edge threats and whatnot. And then you have other individuals that are just competing for that rotational piece. It's exciting because it felt like last year, whereas Rousseau, before he was dealing with a nagging, I believe it was ankle injury, he was still playing very, very well. And then he had that on top of no longer having Von opposite of him. And you saw that production go down. Having that Leonard Floyd insurance all of a sudden really kind of elevates everything there. And hopefully Rousseau, to me, is someone I want to see kind of become that superstar he has the potential of this season. And I think everything is laid out in front of him that he should be able to do that. He should come out the gates healthy and strong early. And then once you get your Von Miller back into this rotation, it is deadly, as long as, of course, he can continue to stay healthy. And then you have Leonard Floyd in there when you get your rotational breaks and whatnot. And then AJ Epinesa, hopefully he can take that step forward to be that 4th man. That's not a bad 4th man to have, as long as he can be serviceable. So it's like, that is very, very underrated. And then interior wise, like, Ed Oliver is something that is kind of polarizing to me, and I'm just not going to touch it too much. My colleague Josh likes to call him Mr. August, and then I call him Mr. Thanksgiving. Show us something else first, please, before I get excited about you again. But he's been impressive so far. Again, there's a reason that we're calling him Mr. August. But the interior defensive line, Daquan Jones, hopefully can stay healthy and everything like that. And then Tim Settle can maybe kind of elevate his game a little bit here. Interior wise, we just need you to be serviceable and stuff, because when the edge is fully healthy, when the edge becomes kind of that X factor it has the potential of on paper, exciting times up front in the trenches for the defensive line.
Yeah, the defensive line. So first and foremost, let me say I don't think Von Miller's playing week one, but I think they've set themselves up beautifully to be able to handle things in his absence. There was a bit, even though Von Miller got hurt and it went down, there was still some productivity with the defensive line, but I think recurring injuries to the interior did a few things. One, it took away the absolute best of Jordan Phillips, which when he's at full health is a very disruptive interior lineman, but it also made things harder for Ed Oliver. Ed Oliver is the kind of guy that I feel like works really well in tandem with this defensive line, and any defensive lineman can do that. I think we've kind of established this like expectation, and I know he was a first round pick, so I understand it. But when you look at like the Chris Jones of the league, the Aaron Donald, or any other defensive tackle, Jeffrey Simmons, like if you want to bring them up, obviously these guys are single man wrecking crews. And when you have that in the interior of your defensive line, that changes everything, like literally everything for your defense, for your line. It is a game changing player. So the absence of that kind of player obviously makes things different and a little more difficult because now things have to really work as a unit. I don't think Ed Oliver, when it's double covered, can beat, or double covered, excuse me, when he's blocked by two guys, can beat that on his own. I just don't think so. I think Ed Oliver is the type of guy that really thrives when there's less on him. And I'm happy to be proven wrong if there are stats that disprove that. But Ed Oliver, when you give him a one-on-one, is going to get by it. And he's going to make a stop on the run. And he's going to get to the quarterback. And he's going to bring that pressure on the interior. And I think when you add in the edge depth to not have that drop off too much, I think you are going to get that productivity out of Ed Oliver. But one thing I think that makes me even more excited for the potential of Oliver after getting paid, especially, is the fact that giving yourself a Leonard Floyd allows you to move Rousseau over to the interior, something they've done in camp a lot. And that is going to work wonders for the defensive line. It is going to make everything so much more difficult for an offensive line. Rousseau in there in the interior, but they run a stunt and he still goes to the edge. Or Rousseau just comes up the middle and then you have maybe Daquan Jones right next to him to also add in pressure, which I know he will, or Puna Ford, or however you want to run it. The fact is you'll have that and still have Leonard Floyd on the edge wreaking havoc in pass protection, which I am so excited to watch. But also, AJ Epinez's stat line last year is what I'll take from a DE4 every single day of the week. And I also think Shaq Lawson could still be a bit disruptive, especially in the running game. So adding in that kind of setup makes me really confident in this defensive line. And that's without fully healthy Von Miller in the mix. When Von Miller gets in the mix, man, and you have that working on the other side of the line, good freaking luck. And that's why I'll let anybody sleep on this defensive line. Because one thing that I'll criticize is they were very injury prone last year. I don't know if that went away. I don't know if Jordan Phillips is going to stay healthy all year. I don't know if Rousseau could stay healthy all year. Maybe it's unrealistic to think so because it's a very physical position. Freak things happen. But on paper, at full health, not only do I have full confidence in this defensive line being good, I have confidence in them being a top 10 to top 5 unit in this league. Genuinely. I think Von Miller is still as good as ever. We'll see how he looks once the knee comes, to full health or as good as it can be. I know it was a bit of a minor tear, so a lot of people are speculating that because it's minor, maybe it's, less to come back from. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to preach anything. I'm not banged up Bills. He would know better than I would. But when I talk about like Von Miller, if he has the juice, if he's the same guy he was last year, coupling that with all of the other pieces you put on this defensive line, while it does feel like it is still a bit patchwork because a lot of them are 1-year deals, with proven upside, I do think that you're going to get a lot of productivity out of them. I think you saw what that could look like last year with Von Miller and how good they were, but I think it's going to be even more so this year, especially with Leonard Floyd as depth. And I think it is the backbone of this Bills defense that is going to make things a lot better and play into your coverage's hands, which makes McDermott probably foam at the mouth thinking about dropping exotic coverages pre-snap, having them run back, and then your defensive line just gets a shit ton of pressure and the quarterback makes a mistake. Like that's what you're going to see. And I'm really pumped. Like I'm just so excited to see it, man. It's going to be really fun to watch. So yeah, Luca, do you have any final thoughts or anything?
No, I mean, everything we talked about today is kind of like the highlights of what's going on. It's all exciting. Like everything we talked about in this entire episode is all exciting things. It's all positive, which is awesome because I feel like going into training camp in the preseason in general, it seemed like there was a little bit more negativity among all Bills faithful and whatnot. And now that we're really getting some like kind of previews of what is to come, and it seems to be all positive vibes coming out of that building and out of that organization, and we're kind of feeling it and whatnot. It's a beautiful place to be. And then real quick, kind of just to go detailed, like the Rousseau sliding inside is a big kind of like key thing. And it's something that we haven't seen a ton of. He still has the capabilities of, and it was talked about when he was first, drafted, that he could be maybe like a baby Calais Campbell kind of impact inside. And I say baby just because Calais Campbell is a massive human being. And even though Groot is sizable in his own right, he's not the size of Calais Campbell. He's very close, but he's a baby Calais. So it would be
1,000 years old.
Hey, when he was in his prime though, back in the Arizona days and stuff, he was an absolute
monster.
Like he was underrated game wrecker monster, and he could just plug up 3 holes by spreading out his wings and just letting the edge do their work when it comes to both run and pass kind of whatever was going on. Like he was just a monster and just ate up everything. So it's exciting to see what the D-line, it's exciting to see what this team is doing. And overall, I'm just happy to see positive vibes happening right now and just the hype train's rolling. And, I'm trying to temper my kind of feelings with everything. That was my goal going into this year, not buy into the hype or anything like that, which it's not like national media has been hyping us up like crazy. And I'm okay with that because I want to be level-minded come week 1. I want to be even tempered and let it go and let the season progress how it is. It's great to see that it's positive right now and everything seems to be going up and up from here.
Just knocking on some wood after that statement. But yes, and again, I try to temper I'm a very big optimist. I've said it a million times. I really do try to look for the good in everything, but I don't say that foolishly. I know a lot of these things that we've mentioned might not or could not, might not, whatever, work out. Like you look at the linebacker room. Yeah, we could say Dotson's very good in the front 7, but that might not pan out the way we'd like it to. We talk about this defensive line, but maybe injuries happen and we don't see the same level of productivity we were hoping to see. Maybe Kincaid has a slow start. Maybe he has the dropsies. That could happen. Like all of these things could happen. But I also think there's valid reasons to be optimistic about what is going into this year and what you're going to see from both sides of the ball, because you've gotten reasons to believe it. I mean, you've seen some of these rookies step up, like a Kincaid, and how he's kind of flashing in practice and all of the complimentary things that have been said about him by guys like Dean Marlowe on Eric and Anthony's show this past week. Or you could talk about like just Knox hyping him up and like that's your other tight end. Like I have very, very much like gotten to this mindset that it's okay to be optimistic. Just don't think it's going to happen, but think about why it could. Affirm yourself of that belief, because it on the same side of it being, it could fail, it could crash and burn. It also couldn't. It could also very much be everything we said ended up coming true and we're super hyped and this team's absolutely stacked and we're a Super Bowl contending team, which I think we are just in general. I mean, look, there's a lot of discourse about the Bills nationally. It happens. When you look at national media, when you look at ESPN, when you look at all of these places, right? These guys have an assignment. They have to be controversial. That's what's getting you ratings. That's what's getting you looks. So when you have the Nick Wrights of the world, even though I think he's Fox, Colin Cowherd, same thing, or Stephen A. Smith or whatever, and you have these guys picking the Jets, picking the Dolphins, it's bait, man. It's bait. And like when you look at an objective football, talk to anyone with a neutral perspective, you'll see that this team that came off a 13-win season has fielding mostly the same roster, has McDermott at the helm. And while there are unprovens and the division did on paper get better, I see no reason to buy into the idea that the Bills didn't get better too. I think the Bills raised their floor exceptionally. And I think the problem was last year, they were a surface level team that could do really well when they had all of their starters in, but all of the depth seemed to be a huge drop off and riddled with injury. This year, I feel like when you look at what's behind the starters, it's way less of a drop. It's not a cliff. It's more like going down a couple stairs to like maybe your basement or something, where it's still like within your house and you still don't have to go as far and you could still be comfortable. Like that's how I see it. And I think the problem is when you have these conversations and you look at like kind of I guess you can call it clickbait, like I don't blame these guys for doing it. That's their job. That's what they have to do. But at the same time, I wouldn't buy into that. I believe there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about this team. I think we've seen all the reasons that we could see this team replicate a 13-win year. I've said to a lot of people, I think 11 to 13 wins is a realistic ballpark for this team. I think they have no reason to go any lower, barring some unforeseen circumstance. I knock on wood again. But it's okay to be optimistic, guys. It's okay to, look forward to watching football and see the positives. And it's also okay to criticize your team and be open about the things that could possibly go wrong and be concerned. That's football discussion. But, I don't think there's any reason to really call any doom and gloom. Like, let's see how it plays out. I think we have a lot of reasons to be excited about this year. And I think we're going to get some really fun and good and fulfilling football to watch this season.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'll finish it up. I was gonna say I didn't know if you were trying to wrap up there. I wasn't sure, but yeah, no, real
I'll
quick.
call
I love to
it.
say this all the time. Stars win games, depth wins seasons. Like that's how it kind of works. Like you need to have that depth in order to get through it. It's just we've been kind of getting by because we also have the biggest star in the division. We have the biggest guy in the division. That is number 17, Josh Allen, and he can get us through and over the hump even in games when we're not exactly firing on all cylinders. It's like now, though, we do have the depth at everywhere other than quarterback. But if you're going to depth at quarterback, there's a lot bigger issues to deal with. Anyways, we have better depth now where when those issues arise, hopefully we can get by beyond the skin of our teeth. Hopefully we can get by, comfortably at times, even where, yeah, even when the lights are the brightest, we can still get through all of this. And it's just kind of more dependent on if we even want to go over the top. It's like you just need hopefully the projection of Dalton Kincaid, as you said, to hit. It's a projection at this point. It's not a reality. We
Mhm.
hope that it becomes a reality, but that's all it is at this point in time. So hopefully that can kind of get us even above everything else. But overall, you just take what you get and you move on with everything that's happening. So yeah, it is what it is, and you just got to temper that a little bit. But yeah, it's exciting times. It's exciting.
Yeah, and real fast, Luca, before I wrap up and I go for our sponsor, I want to address this comment. Spin said this
Okay.
earlier. I started, but this is what he said. It said, but it does kind of stink. You spend 2 third-round picks on linebackers, and yet Dodson is the one that is the favorite for the job. So I'll say this real fast. Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams were third round picks. They were at the end of the third round in an already established linebacker room at the time, right? It felt like we got Bernard a year early because we were preparing him for a role in the absence of Tremaine Edmonds leaving, or maybe if they did expect Leslie Frazier to leave, and maybe this defense does schematically change to some degree, that Bernard will have a kind of niche role that could still be incredibly productive. And when you look at Dorian Williams, I mean, there was an example of this, with the Dolphins. I think last week, one of their players got hurt. Someone they drafted in like a middle round that was a bit high is now in line to be their starter while they recover. This is what Dorian Williams has become. While I expected him to be a middle linebacker candidate, it's clear that they have expectations for him to back up Milano on the weak side. And look, Milano has general soreness right now, but that should be an example of realizing what Dorian Williams could actually be doing for this team. And I think when you look at the fact that, yes, they are third round picks, they're end of third round, basically fourth round picks. A lot of the drop off starts at that point in the draft. And I don't think it's really too much to hang your hat on to say, well, these back to back third rounders are only going to be depth. I very much okay with these guys being serviceable depth if it just means that the product as a whole on defense is still very good and they have a role. So, Luca, what do you think about this?
No, well said. Well wrapped up there. It's like you need them to be serviceable as long as the overall defense and the overall package that is being put out there is still successful. Third round picks are third round picks. What I will add on the Dorian Williams thing is even Bean said you don't want him drinking out of a fire hose. So it's not even like the middle linebacker projection is just out of his future. It's just right now they want him to just learn to play at the NFL speed and just kind of absorb everything happening. And what a great player to have and sit behind in Milano to do that from, and then learn how to be a pro, learn how to play at this level and stuff like that. And then maybe they can kind of look at him attacking that middle linebacker position next year, because just right now they don't have an overwhelming favorite that is Dodson. And then even on the Bernard pick, you brought it up really well, like in case Edmonds left and stuff, there was also technically a buyout of Milano. And that was a debate being had before last season. It's like, hey, if the season, ends next year and all of a sudden Milano hasn't really, found himself, which of course he did. He's a first team all pro, but it's like, if he hasn't, there was that buyout. And then all of a sudden Bernard could have been sliding into there as they then signed to keep Edmonds along. There was a lot of question marks beyond last season that they needed to bring in a Bernard just to kind of have that insurance policy. And now they find themselves in a position where it's like, I'm okay with them being there because they seem to have at least a dependable guy in Dodson who can hopefully be that kind of guy in base packages like we talked about. And then Milano is now a first team all pro. He's a legitimate linebacker. And then on top of it, you even hear from other stuff where they watch football all the time or listen to it or understand the game. It's like the Mike situation. It's not the Mike linebacker we had 15 years ago anymore. You're either a standing linebacker or you're an edge linebacker. That's really what you are. So Milano realistically is probably the leader of the linebackers anyways. It's just Dodson's going to be officially the Mike and have the green dot on his helmet. It's not like Milano just can't take that responsibility on his own. He's traditionally a weak side linebacker and you put him there. It is, he's a will. That's just what it is. He's off center. So be it. He's still lined up above center half the time anyways. I think it's a little overblown when it comes to the Mike and just needing a overwhelmingly dominant guy there. It's like current football, modern football doesn't require that traditional old school Mike linebacker anymore. It just doesn't.
It doesn't. And I want to make this point too. So first and foremost, the reason you're picking at the end of the third round both years is because you are a good team that has to wait for your pick, meaning there's probably a lot of good starting caliber talent on your team. So I am one of those people that also thinks that when you are in a position of contention, you got to start looking at one, your depth, but also your long-term solution. You have to think ahead. And I think what happens is the front office, guys like McDermott, Beam work together. They plan for the future. They plan ahead based on whatever the cap is going to be, based on contracts, based on what it's going to look like in the future, not right now. But what happens is, for a lot of fans, and I understand this completely, and I do it too, today's problems exacerbate tomorrow's solutions. Like it makes it so that when a receiver goes down and you look at this receiver get hurt, you think, well, damn, we could have used that third round pick on someone that wasn't a linebacker that's not starting. But this org probably saw the outcome for Terrell Bernard to get starting reps or have a vital role in this defense in the future. It just didn't come into fruition right now because this person needed to sit behind, learn the playbook, get some time to marinate in the defense. And this receiver just happened to get injured. Obviously not something you planned for. Now you could make criticisms about, the depth at boundary last year, but I saw this team address it this season. And while it sucked to deal with last year, I also think Gabe Davis came back and ended up having a pretty good season. I also think that it's a scenario where, again, you're not going to foresee injury. You're going to foresee what your room looks like. And again, Davis goes down, Kumaro goes down. That's two boundary receivers getting hurt. That's going to happen. So when it comes to picking Terrell Bernard, when it comes to picking Dorian Williams, you're talking about a contending team with a lot of starting caliber talent already. Obviously, Terrell Bernard was not going to come in and have an immediate role, but you did want to see something from him. I can agree with that, but I also think they had a plan for him. That's why they took him there. You are seeing him get into that role now because Tremaine Edmonds left. There are things that we as fans might not know this organization is planning for, and you see that in their drafting, which is why so often our projections for drafts are very wrong because we have very different mentalities than the front office. So that's really all I got to say about it. Luca, I mean, do you have anything else to add from this comment?
No, well said. I'll let you have that final point because it was well said. Everything was perfect on that one, Joe.
I appreciate you. When I make the clip, I'm going to include that too, because everything is perfect. No, just kidding. And this is a good point from Pops Mafia. Linebackers have a lot of tackles, so for sure new depth. Yeah, they're getting bruised. You're making a lot of hits. You're leaning with your shoulder a lot. You're getting trampled on a lot. Like, depth is not a bad thing to have at linebacker. Now, do I think that Terrell Bernard, did I expect him to really take like a leap or anything this year? No, and I've been criticize it a bit. I'm not perfect with this, but I'm seeing kind of just how they're using him and understanding that it was just a different mentality back then to now, and that's just what happens. So it's good to have depth. I think with Dorian Williams, if there's a game where Milano goes down, I'm excited to see what he could bring to the table for a game. And I do think that maybe he is a long-term solution for just having his depth, because it's always good to have someone that you can fall back on. But yeah, man, I don't really have anything else to address. Luca, I'll ask you before I read the sponsor. Do you have any final thoughts on anything we discussed today, or any message to the fans, or anything you'd like to plug? I know you have your show, so feel free to do that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take this opportunity. I appreciate you having me on. Of course, again, it was a fun discussion and whatnot. Just real quick, as Joe mentioned at the beginning, I am of Bills Chat Pod. You can even see it in my title here. You can follow us on Twitter. I will say my co-host Josh, he is the most active when it comes to our social, and we are very active on Twitter. So if you follow us, if you're not already, at Bills Chat Pod, you can interact with him. He always loves to interact with anyone that comes at him with anything. So feel free to give us a follow. We also have a YouTube channel, Bills Chat Pod. Follow us there. We're kind of building that up on our own and whatnot. And then you can find all our content. We do have a podcast that comes out every Monday morning. We have a live show Fridays at 8 p.m. And then we do a bunch of other little content pieces here and there to fill the week and whatnot. We have a lot of fun doing it. And of course, we keep in touch with everyone else so that we can have these glorious kind of appearances here on Joe's show, among other else. And it's a fantastic time every time.
Yeah, I've listened to Josh and Luca plenty of times. It's the reason I try to get them as guests on the show. I love what they bring to the table. Luca, so much fun today. You're welcome back anytime. You had great points. Love talking with you guys. You're always welcome back. Like, that was a lot of fun. I'm sure the chat got a kick out of it too. Give them a like, give them a follow them on Twitter, subscribe to Built in Buffalo and go check out what they have going on. Cause just like what we do on Cover One, they put in a lot of hard work as well, and they deserve to be recognized as well. But moving on, and God, I hope this transition works. We're about to find out with a click of a button, but I'm going to be as candid as I can be about it because it's tricky with StreamYard. So let's just click his show and let's see here. So I have a black screen. that black screen is going to lead to something. I certainly hope it leads to what I hope it leads to. Boom. Did it. Beautiful. Luka and everyone in the chat, I am so excited. I know that Greg revealed it on his show yesterday, but I would like to mention it today. If you didn't already know, Cover One is now sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. And Luka, I want to tell you about the easiest way to get some action on the NFL, and it's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you could win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 to 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry, get every pick right, and take home some cold hard cash. And you can use the promo code COVER1, which is in the description below, everybody. That is starting right now. I alluded to it before. Check the description below, and your first deposit can get doubled up to $100 by Underdog. And during the year, I am excited to say that I am actually going to be making a pick'em myself and running with it the whole year. You could do league long ones. So, I cannot talk. Year-long ones with anyone from the league. And it's an interesting array. You could do like betting on someone's higher or lower on their rushing yards, or you could bet, just certain things like that. So I probably shouldn't use the word. But either way, I am excited to be just reading this. Thank you so much to Underdog for partnering with Cover One. We really appreciate it. I hope all of you can do us a favor and check out that link below. We're really excited to be a part of this. So yeah, that is really it for today, man. I have had a really fun time with you, Luka. This was a great show. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come on the show and just talk with me. Again, to all of you in the chat, I want to thank you so much for just your input, joining us on a Saturday, being able to talk with us and giving your insight. It is always greatly appreciated. Your input is always so valuable, and I love the regulars that come on the show and the newbies. If you are new here, I hope to see you again soon. Please tell your friends about Under Review, tell your friends about Cover One, give us a share, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter and all of the amazing talent we have here. It is truly, truly, truly appreciated. But for me, my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa, where I will be posting more Bills takes and more random stuff that you probably don't care about. You all be good to each other. And one real last final note, just something that I feel like is worth mentioning, but I saw just some things about many athletes kind of in all sports. There's a lot of conversation about like athletes and how we talk about them and how we address them. And, it kind of feels like moving chess pieces, but these men are human. And a lot of them have come out about mental health issues that they have been facing, that they are often using to kind of raise awareness that they do go through it. They do deal with it. I know Gabe Davis was talking about how some of the talk was affecting him this past season. And while, yes, we talk about football objectively, and maybe sometimes we'll say things that can be seen as too far, I do want to remind everybody that mental health matters. It matters with athletes. It matters with everybody. So I hope that all of you are able to take care of each other, be kind to one another, as Anthony says, and take care of your noodle. It's the only noodle you got. It matters. It's the most important thing you got. And making yourself happier and making someone else happier is always a vital thing. And I leave you with that message. But for all of you, my name is Joe DeRosa. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. I'll see you soon, and go Bills.